Hi, I'm Nell Ribby, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the elements and principles of design. The elements of design, line, shape, form, value, color, texture, and allusion to or actual space, are the building blocks of how we talk about anything in visual terms. When we talk about line, we can talk about several aspects of line. One is the line quality. When we talk about line quality, we think about it like we think about people we know. What's it like? What are the characteristics? When we think about the characteristics of the line that we're looking at, they dictate the experience that we have with the image itself. So a line might be soft, hard, curved, whimsical, harsh, machined, aggressive, blurred, lyrical. The quality of the line often has to do with the material that's being used in the image. Another thing that line does is that it structures an image so that you look at it a particular way. A diagonal image is a diagonal line that might be created by the edge of a shape or any other kind of contrast is going to take us up and away or down and away. When we think about it, lines are like arrows. They take us places. So they move our eye around the composition. Shape is a way to unify an image, and you can think about it in terms of, again, the organic or geometric form that it makes, and also think about occupied or unoccupied space, sometimes referred to as negative shape, is certainly as important in the dynamics of a composition as the occupied shape. When we talk about value, we're talking about the relative lightness or darkness of an image. Color is divided into three different terms. One is hue, which is the name of the color, so that would be like blue, red, green, purple, or yellow. One is value, which is the relative lightness and darkness, as we saw in the last slide, but that also has an aspect, that also has a relationship to color. So green can be multiple greens. It can be a dark green or a light green. We think of dark colors in terms of shade and lighter colors in terms of tint. There's also an intensity to color, which is its saturation, brightness, or strength. So that a blue can be of a lesser or greater saturation. Any hue can have lesser or greater intensities, and also various color hues have various intensities. So yellow and purple have different intensities. Another way we think about form is through the idea of texture. How a material expresses a form gives us a very different sensibility for its texture. Our experience of these chickens differs because of how they are depicted. The illusion of space on a flat plane is something that also gives us a sense that also influences how we experience an image. In this particular shot, I have a sense that the rabbit is very far away. The principles of design are basically how you use the elements of design. So in some ways, if you think about the elements, line, shape, color, value, etc., as the words themselves, the organizing principles are the sentences. How do you organize those elements so that they arranged in a particular way to depict a particular experience? One of the things you think about is balance. How is a piece balanced or imbalanced, and what happens to an image because of that balance? So horizontal symmetry or approximate symmetry gives you a sense that things are in balance but irregular. Asymmetry gives you a sense of being off balance, which adds a particular dynamism to a page. Radial symmetry has its own aspects and attributes. We see through contrast. Everything we see is we see through contrast, no matter how subtle or how great. If I asked you to compare and contrast these two figures, there would be many things about them that are the same, many things about them that are different. Proximity is something you can think about when you're wanting to make things feel together or whole or unified. When I put these items in close proximity to each other, you can see that I have three very distinct groupings, simply because they're close together, not because of their animal type or even their scale. Just the fact that they're together makes me think those are three little families, little groupings. Another thing to think about is scale. This is a very important pig, and the reason it's important is because, for the most part, because of its size. Rhythm and repetition are another way to unify a space. In this case, we've got variation and rhythm, so I see this sort of repetition of animals all in a row, but they're broken up with this variety of, every once in a while I'll see a dog or a mule thrown in. That adds a little bit of interest. So while the overall image is patterned and complete, it has variety within it. Emphasis is something we do to create a focal point or to unify a piece, or just to have a particular point of view. In this situation, that front chicken is a focal point. She is more important than the other guys. Partially, she's bolder in color. She's also bigger. She appears to be closer, but she's actually exactly the same as the other hens. But she's been created compositionally. She's placed in a different way, in a different part. Let's see. Compositionally, she stands out. She stands apart. She's lower, she's bigger, she's more yellow. And so I get the point that she's the one that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. Movement is another way to talk about work. The movement here is clearly sort of the line the arc of the sheep that you follow, and then also the rhythm and the pitter-patter of their hoofs as they go black, white, black, white, black, white, and they kind of scramble in the upper left-hand corner. So there's a lot of movement in this piece. A good image is an idea made of thoughtfully composed design elements. When you work to do visual analysis, you're actually trying to tell a story. So what you do is you take the form of the work alongside the object that is depicted in the work, and you try to make a meaning out of it or tell a story. So I'm going to show you a series of works in the following slides where a story is being told using the elements and principles of design. All of the photographs have been taken by a photographer named RHYTM, who has given permission for us to use them for this project. What makes a good image? Elliot Erwitt suggests that photography is an art of observation. It's about finding something interesting in an ordinary place. It has little to do with the things you see, and everything to do with the way you see them. So how does your image add to the dialogue? Why is it that you're interested in taking a picture? What is it about the picture that is really exciting, interesting, provocative, connecting? What are the things that make that picture worth taking? The unifying principle here is clearly line. When you add, if you just sort of break this down into what you're looking at in terms of form, there's the line that is the vertical line in the crack in the wall, and there's the line that goes across the horizon, and then there's the multiple lines that are the edges of the glass and create a horizon across the page. It's sort of simple and it's sort of beautiful, and I think in many ways we're dealing with opposition here, both in terms of the vertical and the horizontal, but also because it's a very beautiful photograph, very subtle. And yet, if you think about what it is, it's sort of harsh, right? So the top of this wall is made out of jagged glass, which if I touch it, it's going to hurt me. It's an interesting story. The unifying principle in this image is all about shape. You can just see all the shapes that make up this little story. You could cut it apart and put it together like a puzzle. It would just be very clear pieces that sort of have the same amount of real estate, same size pieces for the most part. There's also color comes into this as a unifying piece. And but there's a story here, more interestingly. And the story is about this place as a living space. And I connect to it that way. And I think about that bed and I think about that light in a way that makes me curious about what it's like to live in that space. So I bring what I know about living into that. This piece is unified by the idea of color. And it's just this lovely blue that permeates the whole spread of the image, the whole area of the image. Blue walls, blue floor, blue bedspread perhaps, or it might be reflected light. And there's definitely a blue light. There's just a calmness to this piece. And what's the story here? The bed on the porch. It's interesting. Very simple and interesting. Again, what's that like for me? What's it like for me to live in this space? If I think about texture as a unifying element, this image really kind of, let's see, texture is the unifying element for this image. It's got, I'm looking at the cement particles that make that up, then this sort of grungy splatter that happened, the time-worn paint on the painted heart and how that's kind of torn up, the grime in the corners of the walls and on the sill of the metal. Everything about this is about texture, very texture and gritty. What's the story here, right? There's some kind of care that happened with that heart some time ago. Something spilled. This is a very used place. There's stories in this space, even though I'm looking at, this is a story. Here's a story. I'm presented with a story. And I don't, even though it's a very uncommon, let's see. There's a story here on the floor of this. There's a story here. And here's an allusion to space. The space is large, we can tell, because of the very small figures and the very large amount of non-figures. Space unifies this piece, and it makes you question why. Allusion to space unifies this piece. It's very much about the light and the emptiness, the places where there aren't figures. We know that it's a crowded space because of what we know about humans and how big we are. And then we can see all of the empty, we can see the empty area above. And it's provocative. To have just shot the people or just shot the space would have been a different story. Another space tells us about value or lightness to darkness. The space that's framed here is cold and unclear, and the warmth on the inside from the ruffles of the edges of the curtains and the softness of the light on the inside and the precision of what we see on the inside tells us a story about inside and outside and cold and warm. Even though this image is devoid of color, it has a sense of warmth and it has a sense of a story. So when you're looking at an image or when you're framing an image, respond to what you see and put together with it what you think. So what I see here, the red, the figure, the glasses, the reflection, and what I think about Valentine's, right? I think about romantic dates. As I go through the rest of these images, I'm line and rhythm unify this piece. This story is about this clothesline. How I see this clothesline so colorful against everything else, kind of cold and uninhabited. What's important is the color and the horizontality and the fact that I don't know what it hooks onto on the left side, and the idea that aren't those things frozen? There's something very protected and warm and wonderful about what's inside the house and the idea that their clothes are hanging out. It's a great story. Here's a story. I love my dad, Tony. I wish he loved me. What am I thinking about when I look at this? It's a story about things that used to be there. There's flatness and there's depth, the illusion of depth in the middle of this with that photograph, and the very subtle change of color on the wall and the yellow portion, which makes me think things were there. I see the tacks where pictures were hung and over a long period of time because the color has faded around where they were, but they're all gone now. And then the illusion of wood grain, right? It doesn't even look like that's real wood. Everything here feels false, but also that there's a very specific human history. There's a story here. And certainly there's a story here. What I see: line, shape, rectangles, repetition. It's sparse. It feels quiet. What I think: perseverance, practice, dreams, school. What I see: texture, pattern, barrier, surface. What I think: shooting, aggression, time, pastime, fear. What I see: space, lines, distance, figures, scale, horizon. What I think: hot, south, regiment, power, forever. What I see: texture, stains, dress, gray, white, unevenness. What I think: just barely, special day, worry, holding on, ghostly. I see texture and blue and weather, wildness and discard. I think comfort, no comfort, entropy, emptiness, displacement. There's a lot of movement in this piece. I see layers, marks, living, texture, dust. I think history and why the big ball of string? Enigmatic. I see blue, interior light, exterior light, dust, a velvet soft chair, a carefully created portrait, a cross. I think about care, life, connection, movement. Ansel Adams suggested that you don't take a photograph, you make it. So as you think of making your images, think about what drives you, what interests you in the scene.